My name is Alega Decker, and I'm a spiritual care clinician at the hospital, where I experience the relevancy of today's message on a daily basis. I'm bringing this message by video since I'm recovering from COVID. And I'm sitting on a twirly chair, so if you see me moving all the time, then just ignore it. A time to die. Let's start with reading Ecclesiastes 3 together. A time for everything. There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to tear down and a time to build. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to scatter stones and a time to gather them. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to search and a time to give up. A time to keep and a time to throw away. A time to tear and a time to mend. A time to be silent and a time to speak. A time to love and a time to hate. A time for war and a time for peace. What the workers gain from their toil, I have seen the burden God has laid on the human race. He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart. Yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. I know there is nothing better for people than to be happy and to do good while they live, that each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all their toil. This is the gift of God. I know that everything God does will endure forever. Nothing can be added to it and nothing taken from it. God does it so that people will fear him. Whatever it has already been, whatever is has already been, and what will be has been before, and God will cast the past to account. And I saw something else under the sun. In the place of judgment, wickedness was there. In the place of justice, wickedness was there. I said to myself, God will bring into judgment both the righteous and the wicked, for there will be a time for every activity, a time to judge every deed. I also said to myself, as for humans, God tests them, so that they may see that they are like the animals. Surely the fate of human beings is like that of the animals. The same fate awaits them both. As one dies, so dies the other. All have the same breath. Humans have no advantage over animals. Everything is meaningless. All go to the same place. All come from dust, and to dust all return. Who knows if the human spirit rises upward, and if the spirit of the animal goes down into the earth? So I saw that there is nothing better for a person than to enjoy their work, because that is their lot. For who can bring them to see what will happen after them? First, I'll talk a little bit about the author of the book of Ecclesiastes. In Ecclesiastes 1 verse 1 we read, "The words of the teacher, son of David, king in Jerusalem." Most say King Solomon is the writer of Ecclesiastes, but as usual, there is some debate, since his name is never mentioned like in other books he wrote, Proverbs and Song of Solomon. The title teacher, or in other versions, preacher, literally means convener. No one English word represents the Hebrew title of kohela adequately, which is used here for teacher or preacher. It is strictly a feminine form of a verb and describes a person calling together the people with the intention of addressing them. The word taken in this context refers to the action of wisdom. I will read a few verses of chapter 1 and 2 to introduce and summarize what the teacher is telling us in the book of Ecclesiastes. Chapter 1. The words of the teacher, son of David, king in Jerusalem. Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher, utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. What do people gain from all their labors? All things are wearisome. What has been done will be done again. For with much wisdom comes much sorrow. The more knowledge, the more grief. Then we continue with chapter 2. Pleasures are meaningless. Laughter, I said, is madness. And what does pleasure accomplish? I tried cheering myself with wine and embracing folly. I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. I turned my thoughts to consider wisdom, but the fate of the fool will overtake me also. What then do I gain by being wise? I said to myself, this too is meaningless. So I hated life because the work that is done under the sun was grievous to me. All of it is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. I hated all the things I had toiled for under the sun because I must leave them to the one who comes after me. And who knows whether that person will be wise or foolish? What do people get for all the toil and anxious striving with which they labor under the sun? All their days their work is grief and pain. Even at night their minds do not rest. This too is meaningless. So what can chapter 3 mean for us when all is doomed in chapters 1 and 2? One commentator suggested, in being content with the order in which God has placed all things, and not worrying ourselves about that which is not in our power to control. With that in the back of our minds, let's dive into chapter 3. Verse 1, there is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. In the King James Version, it says, to everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under the heaven. Young's literal translation says, to everything a season and a time, to every delight under the heavens. In the Amplified Bible, it states, there is a season, a time appointed, for everything, and a time for every delight and event or purpose under heaven. The word season is used only in later Hebrew and better translated as appointed time or fitting time. And the word purpose is also not used until later, and pleasure or desire or delight is more appropriate. So a much more accurate translation of verse 1 might be, there is a time for everything, and an appointed or fitting time for every pleasure or desire under the heavens. In other words, when we read the list of a time for this and a time for that, they are not opposites, as I have taught for a long time, but they are all affirmative in their own way. A time to be born and a time to die. It always amazes me how different translations give us another perspective, and it is a good practice to read different versions to wake us up to what the Bible tells us. Now we get to our text this morning, a time to be born and a time to die. For most people, death is difficult to accept. Maybe because we do not think or talk about it enough before we get there. We do not explain what we do or don't want to those closest to us. And in the moment we don't care anymore and we leave the difficult decisions for our family to make. Maybe because death arrives when we least expect it. Maybe because we are too afraid to face death. And if we mention the possibility, the spoken words will influence our future somehow. Maybe there is no legal will and we need to live a few more days to sign it. Maybe we have regrets, wrongs that need to be made right, broken relationships to be restored. Faraway family members have not arrived yet to say goodbye. The most difficult might be when the person is ready to die, but the family is not ready to let go. And the person hangs on for dear life, not dear to them, but to others. I have encountered all of the above scenarios, and I'm sure you can think of many more. The other day I sat at the bedside of a 94-year-old lady, and she explained her cancer diagnosis and the decisions she would have to make I asked her what was most important at this time and how she could use the remaining time best to achieve this. Quantity versus quality of life. So complicated when the time arrives, even at 94. How do we know and accept when it is time to die? One commentary simply described this as follows, and I quote, I will read it slowly because the language is a bit old-fashioned. Of what use then was it for man to kick against the goads, to attempt to modify immutable ordinances? Whatever God hath ordained continueth forever. Nothing can be added to it, and nothing can be taken from it. Nay, why should we care to alter or modify the social order? Everything is beautiful and appropriate in its season, from birth to death, from war to peace. If we cannot find the satisfying good in the events and affairs of life, that is not because we could devise a happier order for them, but because God hath put eternity into our hearts, as well as time, and did not intend that we should be satisfied till we attain an eternal good. If only we understood that, if only we recognized God's design for us from beginning to end, we should not fret ourselves in vain endeavors to change the unchangeable, or to find an enduring good in that which is fugitive and perishable. We should rejoice and do ourselves good all our brief life. We should eat and drink and take pleasure in our labors. We should feel that this faculty of innocently enjoying simple pleasures and wholesome toys is a gift of God. We should conclude that God had ordained that regular cycle and order of events which so often hinders the wish and endeavor of the moment, in order that we should fear him in place of relying on ourselves, and trust our future to him who so wisely and graciously recalls the past. They are words of comfort, and yet very difficult to hang on to when the time comes and we look back on life and take stock of what was left undone and unspoken. Now, what does all this mean for us today, here sitting in this place, living life in the everyday, this present moment, knowing that a time to die is coming? Are we able to take verse 12 and 13 to heart and look for enjoyment and fulfillment? Verse 12 says, I know that there is nothing better for people than to be happy and to do good while they live, that each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all their toil. This is a gift of God. Do we know how to live in the moment? Tony Campolo used an example from his own life while teaching a class at the University of Pennsylvania that illustrates this well. In his lecture, he asked an unsuspecting student sitting in the front row, "Young man, how long have you lived?" The student answered, 23 years. Tony responded, No, that's how long your heart has been pumping blood. That's not how long you have lived. Tony Campolo then told the class about one of the most memorable moments of his life. In 1944, his fourth grade class took a field trip to the top of the Empire State Building. It was the tallest building in the world at the time. When 9-year-old Tony got off the elevator and stepped onto the observation deck overlooking New York City, time stood still. In one mystical, magical moment, I took in the city, he said. If I live 1,000,000 years, that moment will still be part of my consciousness, because I was fully alive when I lived it. Tony turned back to the student. Now let me ask you the question again. How long have you lived? The student sheepishly said, When you say it that way, maybe an hour, maybe a minute, maybe 2 minutes. Now, this is an extreme example, and we can't live every moment that fully, since generally life is routine and quite mundane. However, it helps us to quantify life, to ask ourselves what is important, what gives me joy, to live each moment now because we know there will be a time to die. If we become conscious of the reality of death, we might live life more in the moment. Over the past few years, death cafes have been a growing phenomenon. People gather together and talk about death, discussing their feelings and attitudes and fears, to become comfortable with the concept of a time to die. They say that many people who have been near death and recover live more intensely and purposefully, appreciating life each day. Etty Hillesum, who faced death in a prison camp, wrote, "The reality of death has become a definite part of my life. My life has, so to speak, been extended by death. By accepting destruction as part of life and no longer wasting my energies on fear of death or the refusal to acknowledge its inevitability." It sounds paradoxical. By excluding death from our life, we cannot live a full life. And by admitting death into our life, we enlarge and enrich life. Let me read verse 12 and 13 again. "I know that there is nothing better for people than to be happy and to do good while they live, that each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all their toil. This is a gift of God." It sounds so simple, doesn't it? And yet, sometimes it seems impossible. I spent about half a year with a patient in the hospital who had no family and friends visiting him, to remind him of who he was, his accomplishments, the wisdom he had gathered, the places he had seen, what he had looked like. He lost his identity in the hospital. And so when I visited, he would haltingly, while searching for the words, review his history, the places he had been, his employment background, and the food he loved to eat, in order to create a meaningful picture of what his life used to be like, who he had been, made himself to be. Now he was paralyzed, and day after long day his abilities diminished, stripping more and more of himself away, his dignity, his personhood, and one day he said, "My brain is dying. I can't walk, I can't talk, I can't eat. I have become a useless creature." When I read Ecclesiastes 3 verse 18 and 19, I immediately thought of what he had said. Verse 18 says, "I also said to myself, as for humans, God tests them so that they may see that they are like the animals. Surely the fate of human beings is like that of the animals. The same fate awaits them both. As one dies, so dies the other. All have the same breath. Humans have no advantage over animals. Everything is meaningless." In the Orthodox Jewish Bible and King James Bible it says, "And that they might see that they themselves are beasts." In the Amplified Bible it reads, "I said in my heart regarding the subject of the sons of man, God is trying, separating, and sifting them, that they may see that by themselves, under the sun without God, they are but like beasts." The pronoun in these translations is repeated emphatically, that they themselves are like beasts, they in themselves. We learn of our own powerlessness if we consider our own life apart from our relation to God and hope for the future, and then we consider ourselves no better than creatures. I also said to myself, as for humans, God tests them so that they may see that they are like the animals. Surely the fate of human beings is like that of the animals. The same fate awaits them both. As one dies, so dies the other. All have the same breath. Humans have no advantage over animals. Everything is meaningless. I'm not here to say that God was testing this person. He himself did not believe in God. But everything had become meaningless. Without God, there was only the past. There was no future, and so verse 19 became a reality to him, which he, unbeknownst to himself, expressed in the words of Ecclesiastes. My brain is dying, I can't walk, I can't talk, I can't eat. I have become a useless creature. And so may we pray that when we ourselves are there, we will know Jesus is there with us, and we have a future when the time to die is near, and we are able to sing, as we will sing right after, Find me here, Lord, as you draw me near, desperate for you, with arms stretched wide. I know you hear my cry, speak to me now, I surrender. Jesus, breathe within, Lord, have your way in me. This, this brings us to the last verse of Ecclesiastes 3, verse 22. So I saw that there is nothing better for a person than to enjoy their work, because that is their lot. For who can bring them to see what will happen after them? As we consider there is a time to die, I want to end with the following words taken from the pulpit commentary. A man is not master of his own lot, cannot order events as he would like, is powerless to control the forces of nature and the providential arrangements of the world. His duty and his happiness consist in enjoying the present, in making the best of life, and enjoying that which the mercy of God places before him. Thus he will free himself from anxieties and cares, perform present labors, attend to present duties, content himself with the daily round, and not trouble his heart with concern for the future. There are injustices in the life of man, and in the course of this world's events, which man cannot control or change. These may be righted and compensated hereafter. Meantime, man's happiness is to make the best of the present and cheerfully to enjoy what God offers without anxious care for the future. Let's pray. Lord, there is a time for everything, a time to be born and a time to die. Help us to cast all our cares, our worries, our anxieties on you, and know that you know our hearts, our fears, our doubts, our joys and our tears, and help us to live this moment and know that our future is safe with you. Amen. Our song of response will be, I surrender.